Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to talk about surface crusting in agricultural soils. Now, I think a lot of you already have a pretty good idea what crusting is and what crusting looks like. We can see that this soil here has got a bit of a crust going on, just a hard surface here that's really hard for the plants to break through. What I want to talk about today is what causes crusting and what can you do to prevent it in the first place.
So Adam, at this point we find ourselves in an upper slope position. These points in the landscape are usually more susceptible to loss of soil material, and the type of crusting that we normally encounter here is the type we refer to as structural crusts.
I think as a general rule, we tend to notice that at the tops of these hills, the organic matter is lower than it is at the bottom of the hills. A lot of that has to do with just where does the water go and how much plant material does that water support. A structural crust comes when rain comes in and breaks apart aggregates and changes the distribution of the soil. You can see right away that aggregate is starting to break apart, and when it breaks apart, these smaller particles start to smear across the top of the landscape, and when it dries out, you essentially dry it out into a paste. The reason organic matter is important is because it will actually help those aggregates stay together even when there's a raindrop hitting it. And that sort of slows down that initial part of the disintegration of those aggregates. And that's kind of one of the ways that you can prevent the development of crust at these upper slope positions. Richard, now we find ourselves at the bottom of the slope. And this is where you're going to start to get erosion, deposition, stuff that's coming down from the top. And here we get crusting as well, but we call it something different. We call it depositional crusting. So Richard, why don't you tell us a little bit about how depositional crusting forms?
Sure, Adam. As the name suggests, in this portion of the landscape we are receiving successive depositions of the sand, silt, and clay particles that are being loosened from the aggregates on the upper slope positions. As they are deposited here, they settle very tightly against each other. They pack very tightly against each other. And the resulting crust has got a structure that's quite a bit different, noticeably different than what we saw on the upper slope positions. If we look closely at it, you'll see that near the surface that we've got a layering tendency to it, just like a phyllo pastry would have. The other challenge that we have with the development emergence of the seedlings in this portion of the landscape is there tends to be more moisture, and so perhaps that's also aggravating aeration in the soil.
A lot of what we're talking about here boils down to aggregate stability and what water is doing to those aggregates. They're breaking them apart at the top, and then they're bringing those particles down to the bottom. So if you can do something that's going to enhance your aggregate stability, you're going to be well on your way towards prevention of these crusts. Aggregate stability really depends a lot on organic matter. Organic matter is really great at binding together these aggregates. Organic matter is also really great at trying to mitigate a little bit of how these depositional crusts would form as well. There's a few things that people are doing to manage organic matter. The first one is build the organic matter with amendments. If you have access to manure or compost, that seems to be something that is working really well for a lot of growers. The second one is thinking about cover crops, if that's something that you can work into your rotation. A lot of people seem to be pretty happy if they can sneak some clover in after wheat, for example. And that not only gives you more inputs, but it also keeps that soil covered. And the third thing you can do is think about residue management, right? So you've got some residue that's going to not only contribute some organic matter, but it's also going to be acting there as a shield. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about in terms of crusting and crusting prevention, you know what it is, you know what it looks like. You can mechanically disrupt it if you need to, but if you have the opportunity to ward it off, some of the things you can do, look at organic amendments to build up organic matter, look at some cover crops to try and slow the rain down and also build up organic matter, and think about your residue management.